there's no protection in a tent. It was, said one man, the most terrifying night of his life. They managed to get some of the injured to the Kuwait hospital in Rafah. Shock and trauma, fear, pain and grief are all mixed up. It's been going on for so long now, and Rafah was meant to be safe. Safe? What does the word even mean in Gaza today?
We were at home when the airstrikes were happening. I told my mother I wanted to use the bathroom. Suddenly, all the walls of the bathroom and the water containers above collapsed all around me.
Maya al-Najjar survived. She knows that her father didn't make it, but hasn't yet been told that the rest of her family were also killed.
We were in the tent, me and all my family, when the bullets came at us. My father went to see what was happening and said there were airstrikes. Then a strike happened when he was talking and everyone ran.
The airstrikes provided cover for an Israeli Special Forces operation to rescue 2 hostages held in a house in Rafah. It was destroyed afterwards, and neighbours showed the casings of rounds they'd picked up, used in the shootout between the Israelis and those holding the captives. In Tel Aviv this morning, 70-year-old Louis Haar was reunited with his family, as was his fellow hostage, 6-year-old Fernando Marman. Both thinner apparently, but otherwise healthy. Hamas claimed today that a further 3 hostages have been killed in recent Israeli strikes. At least 67 Palestinians, many of them children, were killed in the operation to rescue the hostages, only adding to the concern of Western leaders who want Israel to cease fire, but still refuse to use the leverage of suspending arms supplies.
Well, we are very concerned about what is happening in Rafah, because let's be clear, the people there, many of them have moved 4, 5, 6 times before getting there. And it really, we think, is impossible to see how you can fight a war amongst these people. There's nowhere for them to go.
President Biden is reported to have lost patience with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, but there's still no sign of the Americans exerting any real pressure. The EU, in turn, is losing patience with the Americans.
How many times have you heard the most prominent leaders and foreign ministers around the world saying too many people are being killed? President Biden said this is too much on the top. It's not proportional. Well, if you believe that too many people are being killed, maybe you should provide less arms in order to prevent so many people being killed.
In Rafah now, if you're 5 years old, your version of normal is that instead of playing, you pick stuff out of the rubble of a mosque that was destroyed the night before. The Israeli government says it's determined to mount a ground operation in Rafah to destroy Hamas. How many more Palestinian children's lives will be destroyed in the process?
Well, a short while ago, I spoke to the Israeli government spokesperson Elon Levy, and I began by asking for his response to Foreign Secretary David Cameron's comments that Israel should stop and think before taking further action in Rafah.
After the October 7 massacre, we are proceeding with the destruction of Hamas's military machine, and that we urge civilians to get out of the way because we don't want them to be hurt.
Where should they go?
Hamas has 2 strategies. Well, there are areas north of Rafah where we have already cleared the areas of Hamas, and we want to see civilians going to areas where Hamas is not operating.
So are you now saying that everywhere north of Rafah is now safe and that there will not be Israeli bombardment if people move into those areas?
Unfortunately, until Gaza is no longer governed by an internationally prescribed terrorist organization that is deliberately trying to hide behind civilians, Gaza will not be safe.
So there is nowhere for people to go. I mean, that's what David Cameron said today. There is literally nowhere for them to go. And he is right in saying that, isn't he?
No, we designated, for example, the Al-Mawasi area, just to give one example, as an area in the Gaza Strip where Hamas has not already embedded itself with that vast tunnel network inside the Gaza Strip to hide behind civilians.
You say they should get out of the way, but you have also admitted in this interview there is nowhere safe for them to go because there is nowhere where you can say there will not be airstrikes.
And the international community must insist that civilians can be vacated away from areas where Hamas is trying to use them as human shields to areas where we have already destroyed. No. To areas in the Gaza Strip where we
should help you with this.
Look, since Israel could have gone in all guns a-blazing on October 8th, we didn't because we knew the results would be catastrophic. We gave 3 weeks warnings for civilians to be able to evacuate northern Gaza and secured humanitarian corridors for them to get out because we wanted a fair fight against Hamas without civilians in the way. We think it's horrific that UN agencies have tried to characterize Israel's actions in pursuance of its obligations under international law to protect civilians as forced displacement. Because what do these UN agencies tell Israel? You cannot attack Hamas military targets because there are civilians in the way and they might get killed, but you can't ask civilians to get out of the way because then they'll be displaced. The logical conclusion is that they are telling Israel not to attack Hamas at all.
I mean, it does appear today that you are losing international support. I mean, the British government is now taking quite a strong position. The EU Foreign Policy High Representative Joseph Borrell has said that the Americans should stop sending you weapons. There has been a Dutch court ruling stopping the sending of F-35 parts because of the risk of war crimes. And according to a report from NBC, the US President Joe Biden is now referring to your leader, Mr. Netanyahu, as an asshole.
And at the same time, the White House call out from the conversation yesterday made clear that it is still the shared goal of the United States and Israel that this war should end with the defeat of Hamas. And just a few weeks ago, the European Parliament voted that there should be a permanent ceasefire, but provided that Hamas is destroyed and the hostages are released. We still see the United States, the European Parliament, and Britain to a large extent still subscribing to Israel's war goals in response to the October 7 massacre.
You've called today for the international community's help. What help do you want in terms of where that 1.5 million people should go? Because what it sounds like you're calling for is for the international community to get Egypt to open the border and forcibly displace them.
That is not what I said. That is not Israeli government policy, and that is not what we would imply. We have placed no restrictions on the import of food, water, medicine, or shelter equipment in the Gaza Strip. In fact, we have more than double the capacity at the Israeli crossings for more to enter the Gaza Strip. We think it is horrific and deeply upsetting that Hamas has decided to build all these tunnel shafts and military assets inside and under people's homes and schools and mosques, and deliberately putting civilians in harm's way.
Just finally, I want to talk to you about the Israeli documents, the international documents that were prepared about the UNRWA staff allegations. We've now seen a document that was prepared, as we understand it, to share with international partners, which named the people that you suspected of complicity in the October 7th attacks. Is there any evidence that accompanies that, which you have yet to publish? Have you passed that evidence on to the United Nations?
I can't speak specifically about any intelligence that has been shared, but I can tell you what we did expose this week. We revealed that Hamas had been running a massive server farm, the nerve center of its intelligence operations, from a bunker 20 meters underneath the UNRWA compound in Gaza. Not only that, it had been leaking electricity. Can we stick to these allegations?
I mean, there were huge consequences as a result of your naming of people who worked for UNRWA. What the world has not seen is the accompanying evidence. I just want to know, is there accompanying evidence? Is there anything beyond those names? And have you shared it with the United Nations investigation that is going on? Because there is millions of pounds of aid that is resting on those claims, and hundreds of thousands of lives dependent on it.
When we said that UNRWA, at least 13 UNRWA staff members, and that's apart from the thousands of UNRWA graduates, but the 13 UNRWA staff members were directly involved in the October 7th massacre. That was the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, do you have any evidence for that? That is my question.
Because this was all collected. Because this was all collected on the basis of intelligence that has been shared with our allies. Intelligence that has been shared with our allies.
When was it shared with Britain? Because Britain claimed it didn't know.
I can't speak to the specific intelligence that has been shared with individual Western partners, but that evidence is out there. It is clear.
Well, is there direct evidence about those 13 names? Where is it? Have you passed it to the UN investigation or not?
We do not trust the UN investigation that is taking place.
So there is no evidence that you have placed in front of anybody investigating this?
The United Nations, which has been covering up the Hamas presence literally 20 meters underneath the UN headquarters in Gaza, cannot be trusted to conduct any sort of internal review.
Have you given the evidence
the UN is part
to
of
the US or British governments?
I'm not personally aware of what material may have been passed on between our intelligence agencies.
Elon Levy, thank you very much.
Thank you, Krishna.
Well, I also spoke to the filmmaker Yusuf Hamash, who works for the Norwegian Refugee Council and is sheltering in Rafah with his own family. I began by asking him, what is the situation like there, and what do people make of this call from the Israelis to leave Rafah?
Unfortunately, now families are desperate and doesn't have an options either in their heads or to be realistic. What are the options that put in place in front of more than 1,300,000 citizens who are trapped now in Rafah? From one side, they have the Israeli tank in Khan Yunis, and from the other side, they have the Egyptian border, which is, I don't think this way, if they push people to go to the border, I don't think they will welcome them. So what are the options in front of the people now? The entire Gaza Strip is totally destroyed. In the northern part of Gaza and Gaza City are split from the middle area and Rafah and Khan Yunis. The only option that's available now is the middle area, because in Khan Yunis, there is a military operation on the ground and taking place there. So the only option for 1,300,000 to go from Rafah to the middle area. There is no space for one individual in the middle area. There is more than almost 500,000 are locked in the middle area, which is a small piece of land. Also Rafah, and despite that, families are going huge, tremendous challenges on a daily basis just to provide their basic daily needs for them and their families.
So at the moment, it's only a small number of people who are actually packing up and preparing to move out.
Yes, we saw that today. We realized there is a small number of people who already have some, either they are already from the middle area or they have some relatives to host them there, because there is no space to create camps or makeshift shelters or tents or any of that. And also there is not even one tent is available in Gaza. We didn't receive any tent among the aid for a long period of time. So how people will establish their lives in other places than Rafah?
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. At the moment in Rafah, are most people living in buildings or in tents? And so if they have to move back north, you know, where all the buildings have been destroyed, how will they live?
So it's not only about the buildings. If you're talking about Rafah here, 60% of the entire housing units in all over Gaza have been destroyed. The majority of the 30% remaining is in Rafah. So now the entire Gaza Strip, except for Rafah, is a land of rubble. So it's not about the housing units there. It's about mainly the infrastructure, how they are going to provide water for families who are going to be reallocated themselves in other areas. It's more related to infrastructure, the availability of aid. We are facing difficulties providing the aid here in Rafah. Imagine how it's going to be the situation in other areas. In the northern part of Gaza and Gaza City, it's literally a famine. People are dying from hunger.
I mean, Israel keeps saying there is no limit on aid coming into Gaza. What is the reality?
The daily amount, the average that we receive on a daily basis is 150 truck per day. To be able to recover and assist the families who are in dire need now, especially in Rafah, you are talking about 1,000 truck per day. Before the war, again, we keep saying that Gaza needs 500 truck per day without that huge need that we have now. Imagine how the situation when all of Gaza is destroyed, there is lack of medical supplies, lack of food, lack of drinking water. There is literally lack in everything.
Yusuf, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Christian.